Thank you for accessing this video. This video explains Chapter 7 of chlorination from the Manual for DPHE to support Poroshowa on O&M of piped water supply system. This video was created based on the training material used in the training of trainers for the PICMAC DPHE Phase 2 project supported by JICA. This module covers Chapter 7 of the manual. It is chlorination. The page number is from P7-1 to P7-15. The primary objective of this session is to provide you with foundational knowledge regarding the chemical mechanisms of chlorine in drinking water and the practical ways it is controlled within a water supply facility. By the end of this module, you will understand safety protocols and the inherent risks associated with chlorine handling. Furthermore, you will learn how to diagnose facility performance using specific O&M parameters and identify the necessary countermeasures required to support POSHWAS effectively. Our agenda is divided into 4 key sections: basic theory, confirmation points, action and countermeasures, and finally, troubleshooting and inspection. So, let's start from basic theory part. Chlorination is widely known as a disinfection process, but its role in water treatment is much broader than simply killing bacteria. Because chlorine is a strong oxidizing agent, it performs several additional functions that support the entire treatment process. One important role is the removal of unpleasant odor and taste in the raw water. Organic substances and biological activity in raw water often create these issues, and chlorine helps break them down. Chlorination also prevents algae formation inside sedimentation tanks and filters, which is especially important in warm climates. Chlorine reacts with ammonia by oxidation, which is a specific reaction in the context of chlorination. Not only ammonia, but also organic matters are oxidized, reducing water quality risks to health. In addition, it oxidizes iron and manganese, converting them into forms that can be removed by sedimentation and filtration. Other oxidation methods such as ozone or electrochemical reactions are technically effective for water treatment. However, chlorine is chosen in most water supply systems because of its practical advantages. Chlorine system is relatively simple to operate and maintain. Compared to ozone and electrochemical systems, it requires lower investment costs and less complex equipment. Ozone requires high electricity consumption and careful handling, which is often not practical in small and medium-sized treatment plants. Electrochemical systems also demand special equipment, higher power supply, and technical expertise. In contrast, chlorine provides a balance between effectiveness, cost, and operational simplicity. Another important advantage is that chlorine leaves residual disinfectant in the water. This residual chlorine continues to protect the water during distribution, which ozone and other methods cannot provide. Therefore, chlorine is not only effective at disinfection but also practical for long distribution networks and limited resource environments. When chlorine meets water, a chemical reaction occurs. Chloride forms hypochlorous acid, chloride ions, and hydrogen ions. The most important substance here is hypochlorous acid. Hypochlorous acid is a powerful oxidizing agent. It attacks germs by removing electrons from them. This process destroys the internal structure of bacteria and viruses, preventing them from maintaining their cellular composition. Because of this oxidation process, germs are broken down and cannot survive. When chlorine is added to water, it does not remain in only one form. It continuously changes between two chemical forms, hypochlorous acid, written as HOCl, and hypochlorite ion, written as ClO. The sum of these two forms is called free residual chlorine. This balance between HOCl and ClO depends strongly on pH. In low to middle pH conditions, hypochlorous acid is the dominant form. In middle to high pH conditions, hypochlorite ion becomes dominant. This is very important for operators to understand because both forms are counted as residual chlorine, but they do not have the same disinfecting power. Therefore, measuring only the chlorine concentration is not enough. The pH of the water determines how effective that chlorine will be in killing germs. This chart shows how the form of chlorine changes according to pH. As pH increases from the pH 5, the proportion of hypochlorous acid decreases and hypochlorite ion increases. In alkaline conditions, hypochlorite ion is formed through the reaction between hypochlorous acid and hydroxide ions. In acidic conditions, chlorine gas can be formed. Chlorine gas is extremely toxic, which is why very acidic conditions must be avoided. The chart clearly shows that around neutral pH, hypochlorous acid is the dominant form. This visual relationship between pH and chlorine form explains why pH control is so important in water treatment plants using chlorination. Both of hypochlorous acid and hypochlorite ion work as free residual chlorine. Then which is stronger? The answer is hypochlorous acid. Hypochlorous acid is much stronger than hypochlorite ion as a disinfectant. In fact, HOCl kills bacteria about 80 times faster than OCl at the same chlorine concentration, especially at low temperatures. The reason lies in molecular structure. HOCl is a small, neutral molecule that can easily penetrate the cell wall of germs and act inside the cell with strong oxidizing power. On the other hand, OCl is an ion. It cannot easily pass through the cell membrane and can only act on the surface of germs, making it much less effective. This explains why maintaining a pH that favors HOCl formation is critical for effective chlorination. When chlorine is added to water that contains ammonia, chlorine does not immediately act as a disinfectant. Instead, it reacts first with ammonia to form what is called combined residual chlorine. Although it is still counted as residual chlorine, its disinfecting power is much weaker than free residual chlorine. This reaction is important because it consumes chlorine with ammonia before it can act effectively against germs. In water sources containing ammonia or organic nitrogen compounds, a larger chlorine dose is required to satisfy this reaction before effective disinfection begins. Understanding this helps explain why the same chlorine dosage may behave differently depending on raw water quality. Chlorine reacts with ammonia at first and forms combined residual chlorine. As more chlorine is added, this combined chlorine is gradually oxidized and broken down into nitrogen gas and chloride ions due to the self-oxidation to itself. The point where this breakdown occurs and free chlorine begins to appear is called the breakpoint. Before the breakpoint, most chlorine exists in the combined form and disinfection is weak. After the breakpoint, free residual chlorine becomes dominant and effective disinfection begins. This concept explains why sometimes adding more chlorine suddenly results in a sharp increase in measurable free residual chlorine. This graph visually explains the breakpoint concept. At the beginning, when you start to add chlorine, it reacts with reducing substances and ammonia in the water, and combined chlorine increases as you see at the chlorine level 0.1 to 0.5 milligrams per liter in the graph. When you further add chlorine, the combined chlorine starts to be destroyed through oxidation of itself. This causes the residual chlorine level to drop temporarily, and the chlorine dosage will reach the breaking point, as you can see in the chlorine 0.5 to 0.7 mgl in the graph. Then, at the breakpoint, the combined chlorine is almost eliminated, and further addition of chlorine results in a rapid increase in free residual chlorine, which occurs above 0.7 milligrams per liter chlorine in the graph. This curve shows why understanding raw water quality is essential before deciding chlorine dosage. Without knowing where the system stands on this curve, operators may be underdose chlorine. This graph explains how residual chlorine increases differently depending on the quality of the water. The three lines marked 1, 2, and 3 represent 3 typical raw water conditions, and each responds to chlorine dosage in a different way. Line 1 represents typical water quality without significant ammonia or strong reducing substances. In this case, residual chlorine increases almost directly with dosage because little chlorine is consumed by side reactions. Line 2 represents water that mainly contains chlorine-consuming substances except ammonia. Here, chlorine first reacts with those substances, hence the residual chlorine concentration is 0 till some dosage, then it increases linearly. Line 3 represents water that contains both those substances reacting with chlorine, such as organic matter, iron, manganese, or other reducing compounds, and ammonia. In this case, chlorine first reacts with those substances as well as the line 2. After the residual chlorine concentration increases until the as dosage increases reaches the breakpoint. After this point, combined chlorine is destroyed and free residual chlorine begins to increase. This pattern clearly shows the breakpoint behavior, and this water has a very high chlorine demand. Understanding which pattern your water follows is essential. It explains why the same chlorine dosage can produce very different residual chlorine results depending on raw water quality. Residual chlorine is defined as the sum of free chlorine and combined chlorine. However, these two forms behave very differently in water treatment and distribution, and free chlorine is a powerful actor in the disinfection. Free chlorine, mainly in the form of hypochlorous acid and hypochlorite ion, is the primary disinfecting agent. It reacts quickly and strongly to kill germs. This is why free chlorine is considered the main actor in chlorination at the treatment plant. Combined chlorine, formed when chlorine reacts with ammonia, has weaker disinfecting power. However, it remains in the water much longer. Because of this persistence, combined chlorine plays an important role in maintaining residual chlorine levels throughout the distribution network. The table compares their characteristics. Free chlorine provides strong and fast disinfection but disappears quickly. Combined chlorine acts slowly but remains for a longer time inside pipes. This difference explains why residual chlorine includes both forms. One ensures immediate safety at the treatment stage, and the other helps protect water quality during distribution. This table shows how much chlorine is consumed by different substances present in water. Substances such as ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, iron, manganese, and nitrite all react with chlorine before it can act as a disinfectant. For example, ammonia consumes a large amount of chlorine. It requires 7.6 milligrams of chlorine for oxidation per 1 milligram. Iron and manganese also consume chlorine, although to a lesser extent. Nitrite and hydrogen sulfide also contribute to chlorine demand. By referring to this table, operators can estimate how much chlorine will be consumed by these reactions before effective residual chlorine appears. This is essential when raw water quality changes. Without considering these reactions, chlorine dosing may be insufficient for disinfection or unnecessarily excessive. Here is an example which is showing how to calculate the necessary chlorine dosage based on raw water quality. Suppose the water contains 0.10 mg per liter of ammonia, 0.20 mg per liter of iron, and 0.15 mg per liter of manganese. From the previous table, chlorine consumption for ammonia is 7.6 mg per liter per 1 mg per liter of ammonia. Therefore, for 0.10 mg per liter of ammonia, chlorine consumption is 0.76 mg per liter. For iron, the consumption is 0.6 mg per liter per 1 mg per liter. So, for 0.20 mg per liter, the consumption is 0.12 mg per liter. For manganese, the consumption is 1.3 mg per liter per 1 mg per liter. For 0.15 mg per liter, the consumption is approximately 0.195 mg per liter. Adding these together, the total chlorine required just to satisfy these reactions is about 1.075 mg per liter. Only after this demand is satisfied will free residual chlorine begin to appear for effective disinfection. This calculation demonstrates why understanding raw water quality is essential for proper chlorine dosing. A clear target for chlorination is necessary to ensure both safety and acceptability of drinking water. The recommended target is to maintain 0.2 mg per liter of free residual chlorine throughout water treatment and distribution. Two critical control points are emphasized. One is at the distribution tank outlet, and the other is at the user's faucet. These points confirm whether chlorine remains effective after passing through the entire system. Residual chlorine is a key indicator of water safety. However, too much chlorine causes a chalky or chemical odor and affects taste. Therefore, residual chlorine should be kept below 1.0 mg per liter. This balance between minimum safety level and maximum acceptable level is essential for proper chlorination management. Different chlorine compounds have different chemical weights, but they are compared using the concept of available chlorine concentration. This shows how much effective chlorine corresponds to chlorine gas. For example, sodium hypochlorite and chloramine have different molecular weights and solubility, but available chlorine concentration allows operators to compare their disinfection strength on the same basis. The table shows how these forms differ in solubility and effective chlorine percentage. Sodium hypochlorite has a higher available chlorine concentration and stronger disinfection ability compared to chloramine. Chlorine is used in three main forms: gas, liquid, and powder. Gas chlorine is used in large treatment plants. It is stored as liquid under pressure and released as gas for dosing. This system is effective but requires careful handling and complex equipment. Also, it is worth noted that it is a very dangerous toxic gas. Liquid chlorine, commonly sodium hypochlorite with 6 to 12%. It is easier to handle and injected using diaphragm pumps made of non-metallic materials to avoid corrosion. It can decompose after long storage. Powder chlorine, such as bleaching powder or calcium hypochlorite, is often used in Porshwa water treatment plants. It is dissolved in water to prepare a solution and then injected by pump. Powder form can also decompose after long storage as well as liquid. Each type has advantages and operational considerations depending on plant size and capacity. Gas chlorine is typically used in relatively large water treatment plants such as OVASHA facilities. This diagram shows the gas chlorine system. 1. In this system, chlorine is stored in cylinders as liquid under high pressure. 2. When released, it vaporizes and becomes gas. 3. Chlorine gas moves from the cylinder through several control devices to adjust the pressure. 4. Through a vacuum regulator and flow control devices before entering the injector, the flow rate is controlled. 5. The injector uses the vacuum created by flowing water to draw chlorine gas into the water stream. Finally, 6. Chlorine mixes with water and becomes chlorine water, which is then injected into the treatment process. These photos show actual components of a gas chlorine dosing system. The evaporator converts liquid chlorine into gas. The vacuum regulator ensures that chlorine flows only when vacuum is present, acting as a safety device. The chlorinator is with flow control valve to adjust the chlorine flow rate. Chlorine gas is highly effective but also dangerous. Here are major risks and hazards which have to be keep in your mind. 1. Acute exposure can cause severe respiratory damage and can be fatal at high concentrations. Chlorine also causes serious skin and eye burns. 2. When chlorine reacts with water, it forms hydrochloric acid, which corrodes metal pipes and equipment. Leaks can occur if corrosion is not managed. 3. Although chlorine itself is not flammable, it can react explosively with certain substances. 4. Storage and transport also pose risks if containers are damaged or valves fail. These hazards explain why strict safety measures are essential when handling chlorine. Based on the risk and hazard, preventive safety measures are essential to be taken in any facility using it. 1. Chlorine must be stored in a dedicated, well-ventilated, temperature-controlled, and tip-proof area. 2. Gas leak detection systems and alarms should be installed together with emergency shutoff valves. 3. An outdoor exhaust or suction equipment is necessary so that leaked chlorine gas can be safely discharged away from people. 4. All equipment and piping should be made of corrosion-resistant materials. 5. Personal protective equipment is mandatory. Full-face masks, protective suits, gloves, and safety goggles must be available and used when handling chlorine. 6. Clear emergency plans, evacuation procedures, and regular drills are also required. Finally, professional education and training are critical so that operators understand hazards and know how to respond in emergencies. Liquid chlorine, usually sodium hypochlorite, is easier to handle than gas chlorine. Here, you see some mechanical equipment used for the liquid type chlorine. The picture shown here is a diaphragm pump for injection. Non-metallic materials are used to prevent corrosion. Diaphragm pumps are commonly applied because they provide precise and stable dosing. The flow rate is controlled by adjusting the diaphragm stroke frequency. The diagram shows how the diaphragm moves back and forth, creating suction and discharge processes. Non-return valves control the direction of flow, ensuring accurate injection of chlorine solution. Understanding this mechanism helps operators diagnose dosing problems and maintain stable chlorination. Next, powder form. Powder chlorine, such as bleaching, is commonly used in relatively small water treatment plants. The powder is first dissolved in water in a dosing tank. A motor-driven propeller mixes the solution to maintain uniform concentration before injection. Usually, a 5–10% solution is prepared. The effective chlorine content of powder is typically 70–80%, which must be considered when preparing the solution. The example here shows how to prepare a 10% solution in a 100-liter tank when the powder has 70% effective chlorine. Here is a simple example for the calculation of the 10% chlorine solution made from 70% effective chlorine powder. First, multiply 100 liters by the target concentration of 10%. Then, divide that number by 70% of the effective concentration of chlorine powder. As a result, you will figure out that 14.3 kilograms of powder is required. After adding water and mixing for around 30 minutes, the volume is adjusted to 100 liters. This preparation process ensures accurate and consistent chlorine dosing. I am now explaining about the dosing points. Chlorine is not added at only one place in the treatment process. There are 3 possible injection points: pre-chlorination, intermediate chlorination, and post-chlorination. Each point has a different purpose. Pre-chlorination supports upstream processes such as sedimentation and filtration. Intermediate chlorination assists oxidation of specific contaminants. Post-chlorination ensures residual chlorine remains in the distribution system. Among these, post-chlorination is the most important because it directly protects water quality up to the user's tap. Understanding where chlorine is injected helps operators understand why chlorine is used not only for disinfection but also as a supporting chemical in the treatment process. And I will explain each dosing point one by one. Pre-chlorination means adding chlorine before sedimentation and filtration. It is mainly applied in rapid filtration systems. Its objectives include preventing algae formation in sedimentation tanks and filters, oxidizing manganese and iron, removing ammonia, and reducing strange taste and odors. It also helps decompose organic matter. The target residual chlorine at this stage is about 0.2 milligrams per liter. A very important caution is shown here. If chlorine is injected before aeration in water containing iron, chlorine is wasted for oxidizing iron. Aeration can do this oxidation without using chlorine. Therefore, prechlorination should be applied after aeration, not before. Intermediate chlorination is the addition of chlorine midway through the treatment process. Its main purpose is to oxidize contaminants such as arsenic, iron, and manganese, especially to support catalytic reactions in manganese sand filters. The question may arise, why chlorination is needed after prechlorination? Even when prechlorination and aeration are applied, they may not completely oxidize high levels of contaminants. Intermediate chlorination ensures that this oxidation process is completed. However, in many cases, aeration alone or prechlorination combined with aeration is sufficient. Intermediate chlorination is used when additional support is needed for oxidation. Post-chlorination is the final chlorine addition at the end of the treatment process. Its purpose is to ensure that residual chlorine remains in the water until it reaches the user's tap. The objective here is to maintain residual chlorine between 0.2 and 1.0 milligrams per liter at the user's faucet. According to the Bangladesh Drinking Water Standard, 0.2 milligrams per liter is the minimum requirement. Post-chlorination provides the final disinfection effect and protects water during distribution. However, residual chlorine is gradually consumed by natural decomposition and reaction with the tiny substances remaining in the treated water or in the pipes such as organic matter as water travels through the network. Excess chlorine creates unpleasant odor and can affect health if exposure continues over time. Therefore, constant monitoring at the user's faucet is essential to balance safety and acceptability. As shown in this graph, residual chlorine does not remain constant after leaving the treatment plant. It gradually decreases during distribution. If chlorine is injected only at the treatment plant, residual chlorine may be sufficient near the plant but too low at distant points. This creates a risk where water at far locations is not properly disinfected. The graph illustrates this decrease over distance. The residual level near the plant is higher, but it falls as water moves through pipes. However, if you inject chlorine during the distribution, the residual chlorine level will be retrieved. Because residual chlorine decreases during distribution, additional chlorine injection may be necessary within the network. Two practical methods are shown. One is installing a relay tank in the middle of the distribution line. The other, more practical method, is injecting chlorine directly into the pipe. The optimal injection point is determined by measuring residual chlorine at different locations in the network. Recently, simulation programs are also used to predict how residual chlorine behaves in distribution systems. This helps plan effective booster chlorination points. These methods ensure that adequate residual chlorine reaches even the farthest users. Here you see the chlorine measurement methods. Chlorine measurement must be done as quickly as possible after sampling. Ideally, it should be measured within 30 minutes. This is because chlorine easily evaporates and decomposes, which leads to inaccurate results if testing is delayed. If it is not possible to measure at the sampling point, the sample should be stored in an airtight container to minimize chlorine loss during transport to the laboratory. Field test kits are also very useful. They allow operators to measure chlorine on site without depending on laboratory equipment. The DPD method and electrode method are commonly used for this purpose. The key point here is that accurate chlorine measurement depends not only on the test method but also on how and when the sample is handled.